Peppa, George and Zoe were going for a picnic in their camper van. Mummy and Daddy Pig were busy today, so Kitty was driving. They all got in and off they drove. "This seems like a good spot," said Kitty. "I'm hungry," said George. "Let's eat." They all helped get the table and chairs out of the camper van. "Where's George?" said Zoe. George had found the food, but the hamper was too heavy for him. Peppa took the hamper and brought it to the table. "I'm really hungry now," said George. Peppa was just about to get the food out when they heard a train in the distance. "Look," said Zoe, "it's Thomas, Annie and Clarabelle." They all watched as Thomas went past. "Come on," said George, "the food." But they then heard another train. This time it was the Hello Kitty train, and on board was their friend Susie. They all waved. The food was now on the table, but at that precise moment it started to pour with rain. "I don't mind wet food," said George, but the girls started packing it all away. George had a few problems with the table, but they still got everything packed away. "What shall we do now?" said George. "I really am very hungry." Kitty said she knew somewhere where they could eat, and they drove off in the rain. When they reached the cafe, they all saw the cakes in the window. Wow! George was out first, but they all quickly followed. Inside, in the dry, they ordered a plate of the biggest cupcakes you've ever seen. They all helped themselves, and George ate his in one gulp. "What a greedy pig you are, George," said Peppa. They all finished their cakes and went outside. It had stopped raining by now, and the cafe was next to a park. "Let's go on the slide," said George, and they all followed. The rain had made muddy puddles at the bottom of the slide, and one by one they all landed in them, getting covered in mud. They all agreed it had been a very good day. Peppa Pig and Thomas the Tank Engine were at the starting line of a scavenger hunt. They had to hunt for items they would need to solve a number of puzzles. Overseeing the event was Peppa's teacher, Madame Gazelle. They were off. Their first task was to find as many letter tiles as they could and return to the starting line. There they would find an iPad that has been fitted with a recently released Osmo base and cleverly designed mirror fitted over the camera. The iPad had 3 Osmo apps downloaded onto it, and the first app Peppa was to undertake was called Words. They then unloaded the tiles in piles, which actually spelt out the name of someone we know. Peppa pressed the start. A picture appeared as a clue, and Peppa had to guess what it meant and find the correct letters and place them in front of the iPad. Peppa chose R, and she was instantly told she was right, but I think the R went in a different place to the one Peppa was thinking. "I bet you thought that was a robot, Peppa." Peppa thought hard and continued. When you get a letter wrong, the iPad places the letter at the top and you continue to play. This game is usually played by 2 people competing against each other, but today it was just Peppa. There's a link in this video's description to see full details of the Osmo product and apps. Peppa finished. Well done, Peppa. Peppa only had to solve one puzzle today, but there are hundreds. Their second task was a tangram, and first they had to collect 7 brightly coloured shapes. While they were doing this, Madame Gazelle had a closer look at the iPad and somehow managed to turn it off. George, Peppa's younger brother, showed Madame Gazelle how to turn it on. "Ah, grown-ups," he said. "We haven't got Wi-Fi in the classroom," said Madame Gazelle. "Doesn't matter," said George. "Once you've downloaded the app, you can use it anywhere." Peppa and Thomas were just finishing collecting the shapes. A shape appeared on the screen in black and white, and Peppa had to place the coloured pieces in the right place in front of the iPad. When correct, the colour appeared straight away on the screen, giving instant feedback. "This is clever," said Madame Gazelle. "No sensors, just natural wood pieces and mirrors. Clever." Peppa pushed the last piece into place. "Well done, Peppa. You only have to do one puzzle today. Now back to Thomas." Their last task was called Newton, and for this Peppa and Thomas needed to collect some everyday objects. Thomas thought the docks were a good place to go. "A banana. The curve on the banana could be very useful," said Peppa, "and I can eat it afterwards." Next she saw a Hello Kitty toy. "That's an interesting shape, and I can then play with it." She then stepped out and put her foot in a lump of Play-Doh, said Peppa. "That would be useful, because I can make it whatever shape I want." They thought 3 objects would be enough and returned to the iPad. Now Peppa had to place her real objects to direct falling balls on the screen, aiming them at a stationary target. Peppa was doing well. She finished the 1 target game and started on the 2 target game. As you can see, anything placed on the ground is immediately converted into gameplay. But it's certainly easier to move them around when your hand is not inside a glove puppet. Peppa finished. Well done, Peppa. If you want to make learning fun and do the same puzzles Peppa did, and hundreds more, just follow the link in the video description. It turned out Thomas and Peppa had the fastest time and won the Scavenger Cup trophy. Madame Gazelle was giving Peppa and George a lift in her car. They were going to the park to go on the new roller bumper car ride. At the park, they met their friends Rebecca and Candy. Madame Gazelle didn't like heights, so she'd bought a book to read. The first 2 cars were pushed into the station by Thomas. Peppa and George jumped in and off they went. They bumped around the track before going into the steep climb. It was a long way down. They got nearer the edge of the drop and Thomas pushed Peppa over. George followed and they bumped at the bottom. Percy was now pushing Rebecca and Candy. Wow, what fun! Thomas and Percy then pushed Peppa, George, Rebecca and Candy all over the place. In the end, they were all quite giddy and pleased to get out of the cars. They told Madame Gazelle how much fun they'd had and then started their journey home. Wow! Look at that roller coaster, said Peppa Pig to her friends. Peppa and her brother George had come to the theme park for a day with Peppa's friends, Susie Sheep, Rebecca Rabbit and Zoe Zebra. Let's go on the big wheel first, said Peppa. We'll leave the roller coaster until we're feeling brave enough. They got to the big wheel and started getting into the pods. First to get in was Rebecca, then Susie, then Zoe and then Peppa. There were only 4 pods, so poor George had to wait. The wheel started turning. They had a great view of the park from the top. George waited for his turn. The wheel stopped and Peppa got out and let George on. Peppa then watched from the side as her brother had his turn. They then decided to go to the balloon ride. How can you ride these balloons? Said George. No, not these small balloons. These big balloons. Peppa and George got into the balloons' baskets. The balloons rose up and then started spinning really, really fast. Eventually they came to a stop. They got out and everyone else had a turn. They then decided to test their strength. I'll do it, said Zoe. And she hit the button so hard the balloon flew up and hit the bell at the top. Well done, Zoe, said everyone. Then they all got an ice cream. The ice creams filled them up and they agreed they should wait a bit before going on any more rides. 1 minute later though, they were at the Helter Skelter. Peppa got to the top very quickly and slid all the way down. They all took turns and then George got to the top. He was now very much regretting insisting on the extra large strawberry ice cream. However, he made it down without incident, but had to sit out the next few spinning rides. The Hall of Mirrors was next. Wow, I wish I hadn't had that ice cream, said Peppa, for a different reason to George's reason. Me too, said Zoe. Then came the theme park train ride. I'll drive, said Peppa. On the second run, George drove. Now I'm feeling brave enough for the roller coaster, said Peppa. I'm getting into Thomas, and in she jumped, followed by Rebecca. Off they went. Wow, that was great, said Peppa. The next train to come along was Lady. In jumped Susie and Zoe. Last of all was George. Fully recovered from his large ice cream, he jumped into the Winnie the Pooh train. That was the best day ever, they all agreed, and they had just enough time to run across and buy a balloon each to take home. Thanks for watching our story. To watch more, just click on any of these clips, and if you haven't already subscribed, why not do so now? See you soon.